Hi everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we have the ENFJ live Q&A with Markey. Would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Hi, everybody. So I live in Vermont now, and I'm a consultant. I've been a consultant for 30 years or so, as long as I can ever remember. I'm originally from California, and my husband and I have been business partners on and off over the last 30 years or so, but when we're currently business partners. I can talk more about that when we get into type dynamics. So, when I was thinking about this conversation, I thought, type saved my life in so many ways. And I first learned about type in 1992. And I was immediately fascinated and drawn in. And when I got certified and I started really using type and understanding some of the dynamics, it just sort of took away a lot of need for the therapy that I was doing at the time. I was in my 20s and, time to figure out who the hell you are anyway. And it just freed me up from a whole lot of stuff. And so I've been a dedicated type user and researcher and trainer ever since, because I just see how it unlocks things. And really now what I do is I say it unlocks our superpowers, because I think when we really understand who we are, then, we can really get on with who we are instead of trying to be somebody else.
Yeah, we can make the most out of our superpowers instead of trying to take someone else's. And so type was a lifesaver to me too, so there's that common ground there.
Yeah.
And so Markey actually has a workshop on Saturday if you want to check it out. It's in the links below, and I'll copy and paste the day into the live chat. And so if you're free, then feel free to check her out. She has wonderful material, and her presentation is just going to be marvelous. And so would you like to tell us about your superior function, extroverted feeling, and how you experience it?
Sure. So extroverted feeling, I think when I didn't understand extroverted feeling, I thought I thought everybody, cared about what everybody was doing and was worried about how everybody was getting along. And learning about my extroverted feeling, myself and one of my sisters, I have 4 siblings, are the only ones in my family that use extroverted feeling. And we use it very differently. She's an ESFJ and I'm an ENFJ. And it just had me understand why I was the one that was always trying to get everybody to get along. And I was able to get along with each of my siblings individually, but we somehow couldn't all get along together. And so that was my first awakening about that. And then, but the other piece about extroverted feeling is I think that it's painted or described so often as everybody always has to get along and cheerful and nurturing. And the other side of extroverted feeling is they want to get stuff, want to make things happen, particularly when it's paired with intuition. And so that's the piece that's been really fascinating to me too, is that, yes, I want to get along and I want to help everybody get along together, but I also really want to move things forward. And it's that external structure that the extroverted decision-making brings that's really been interesting to me as I've gotten older. And, it's hard to let go of how everybody thinks and what everybody feels about stuff. And it's really hard to let go of that because it's always there. It's always a piece of, my decision-making and my processing.
Yeah, gotta consider people's needs within the decision-making process.
Yeah.
And so Jonathan Campbell is asking, what happens Saturday, March 5th? So that is Markey's workshop at the Sacramento APTi. I have the links below. I am helping the APT board members spread awareness of the events coming up. And so if you're wondering why I'm interviewing a lot of people from that school of thought, it's because I want you all to get along. So this is my way of FEing. All right, Markey, how do you experience introverted intuition?
Introverted intuition. that's, that's the fantasy and the visioning. I used to have a lot of big ideas when I was younger. I had a lot of big ideas and big sort of visions about where I was going to be. And when I would tell people, they often thought that it was kind of strange that I had, such big ideas. Like, where did that come from? And I couldn't explain it. I could never explain why I thought those things and why I really believed them to be absolutely true. I also, I think that when I was younger, it was probably more flights of fancy of, trying to fantasize out of difficult situations rather than being present to them. And now I tap into my intuition to help me resolve things that don't seem like I can't see another way. So I just stop and I consider quietly. I often say to people, I take a soft gaze on the situation and just allow some free-flowing internally. And that's another piece that's interesting to me too about intuition, is often explained as though it's this lots and lots of ideas. And I think that's really more of extroverted intuition than introverted. And introverted intuition needs a quiet space to function. And when I learned how to enjoy and sink into that quiet space, all kinds of wonderful things came to me. It's not just challenges with clients or in my life, but I also get whole, story downloads, storylines downloaded to me that are in the magical realism realm. And I've learned to just go with it and write down the notes. And then next time I'm at my computer, work on the story and create that. I have a whole collection of short stories I've written in that. And those have been really fun to play with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's an element you mentioned of knowing and divining and singular insight that NI brings to the table. And so how do you experience
singular insight? It's a focusing in on what's sort of workable rather than all of the possibilities of what's available.
Yeah, it's very convergent in nature.
Yeah.
And so how do you experience extroverted sensing?
Extroverted sensing, I think that extroverted sensing for me showed up when I it's almost as though I woke up sometime in my 20s and realized I had a body that was attached to my head. And I got into, yoga and fitness in ways that I had never, ever been before. I never considered myself a lazy person or just somebody who hung around, but I never really intentionally worked out until I was in my 20s. And then, and I also really didn't know how to cook very much. I knew how to eat and nourish my body, but I didn't really know how to cook, and I didn't really appreciate food in that way. So I learned how to cook, and I learned how to move my body in more elegant ways. And later it got into understanding fashion and things like that worked. Instead of, again, trying to emulate somebody else's style, really finding my own and creating that as an identity rather than trying to mimic something. So those are some of the ways it shows up. And actually in my everyday life, my husband and I own 5 acres here in Vermont, and we are what we call in the US homesteaders. So we grow a lot of our own food, and which means I cook a lot and create a lot of things. We produce about 65% of our own food. And so that's really a nice expression for extroverted sensing for me, because I also get to do the planning and kind of, big visioning, but then there's the physical manipulation of things and working with things, getting my hands on the food. So that's been fun.
Wait, you're saying you're not just a floating head with ideas and thoughts about reality?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool. And so how do you experience introverted thinking, TI?
Excuse me. Introverted thinking. So I married a man who's an INTP, who's dominant introverted thinking, and I never really I never really understood how it worked in me. I could see it in him. And then I remember sometime in my mid 30s, like as though it's like just like when I discovered I had a body. It was like the first time I thought, those Excel spreadsheets, there must be something to that. And I actually got into using Excel spreadsheets. I had used them before, but never really appreciated the complexity. And I was doing some research, and I was really fascinated with pivot tables and understanding how to create all these things. And my first, my Excel spreadsheets quickly became very complex and sort of ridiculously complex in ways that they actually didn't work because I didn't really understand how to use them. I just was fascinated. Now I know how to use them better. So that was one of the first places. And I think also because it's the fourth function is always sort of operating in this behind the scenes way for all of us. I can see now that my ability to understand fairly complex things and unravel and find an entry point to learn more about them is where introverted thinking also showed up for me earlier in my life. And now it's, so my husband and I are partners in many things, and we really lean into each other's dominance in a nice way in terms of like, hey, I'm thinking about this. I'd like to help thinking it through further. I'm considering this. And so I've really allowed myself to appreciate more of how he thinks and own more of that for myself rather than think it was all over there.
It's nice to see that integration later in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so everyone, feel free to ask your questions in the chat to the side. Ask about life or literally anything. I believe in asking indirect questions as they get to type better sometimes than asking direct questions always, because you can see someone's thought process with going through how they reason through your question. And so to let you all know, again, for the millionth time, that Markey is holding a workshop at the Sacramento APTi, and it's on Saturday. And I aspire to build a bridge between the APT and the online community of type so that everyone can benefit from the fruits that they have. And so the first question is, how has your experience with self-care transformed over time?
That's a really great question. I don't even think that I understood what self-care was when I was younger. And I think that this is often the case for dominant extroverted feeling types, is that they are so much focused on other and the sacrifice of the self. For me, it really started to show up when I moved in with my husband before we were actually married. He had 2 young children, 2 young boys, and all of a sudden I was a parent, and I was pretty young. And so the need for space for myself and claiming that in a way that was respectful of everyone else was kind of the first real understanding of that. And then not apologizing for it, learning to just say, yes, I need this time and it's important for me. And being what I would consider selfish about that self-care. So I think that so often when I think of taking time for myself, I think that somehow I'm being selfish in terms of not paying attention to other people. And excuse me. And when I started to shift to, if I don't take care of myself, actually nobody else is. And if I don't take care of myself, then I can't do all those other things that are important to me. So health and well-being have become, physical health and well-being have become important. Mental well-being, spiritual well-being. For me, they're all integrated. And if I'm only doing one of those, it's really shows up as like a weakness in some of the other areas too. They all kind of integrate for me.
Yeah, there's a bit of a holisticness to self-care that you have to get all the areas met.
Right.
You can't have a one-sided self-care. What are some practices that have helped you the most that you would recommend to other people looking to care for themselves more?
Going away by myself, just literally like leaving. In fact, I just took a 10-day writing retreat completely by myself. I found a little tiny place in northern Vermont. I went there for 10 days and wrote. And I could have actually done some of that work here. I mean, it's not like, it's not like I live in the crowd of 100 people or something. But when I'm home, I tend to take care of all the things in my house and other people and my husband and other things. So it was really great to just separate. And I've learned that that's a big piece of it. And finding small things, actually, it's funny. I think that something I didn't really occur to me until maybe about 15 years ago, how important color is. Colors of what I wear, colors of what are around me. And like when we bought the house that we're in now, it has an office suite attached to it. Like everything was painted the same color white. Everything was white. It was like the thing, everybody paints their household white before they sell it. And we didn't paint it for a long time until I started realizing how much color was important to me. And I started creating a richer visual stimulation around me by putting colors around the house that were important to me. So my office, and strangely, every room in my house has at least 2 colors in it. Sometimes it's the same color, but different tones. So this is green wall, but the wall I look at is actually orange. And every room in my house has different kinds of colors that kind of complement and work together. And they just make me happy when I'm around them. I just, finding my favorite, just really owning that I have a favorite color, which happens to be orange. And just like going for it, like really owning that has been so much fun and really good for me because, again, not trying to apologize for it and trying to explain it to people. It's just like, yeah, I like orange. And everybody who knows me well knows I like orange.
Yeah, and as an ENFJ, it can be hard to attend to things that deal with yourself. So it's like, I know what I like. That's amazing. That is great. What about orange really strikes your fancy?
I don't. It's a comfort color. I mean, so first of all, I grew up in the 1970s in Southern California, and like avocado green and like burnt orange. Those were the colors of the time. Like appliances came in those colors. Those were kind of the colors of the time. And so somehow it is a comfort, like of a childhood comfort. But as a friend of mine that she noticed that every time we go into a shop together, the very first thing I touch is always orange. Doesn't matter what the item actually is. Doesn't even matter what kind of store we're in. I will find something orange, and that is the first thing I touch in the store. So there's something that's just grounding and fulfilling for me. It's like it's a warm color, it's satisfying, and it's like juicy and warm and fuzzy, and
you're drawn to it. There's something there. What is something you enjoy about the company of others?
I love listening to people's stories. I love like discovering, how did you get to be who you are? And then like, where are you going with that? Like, I'm always amazed at how people put themselves together every day and function in the world. It's just sort of like, it's an endless fascination for me. And because I'm a type user, I'm always observing and hypothesizing. I may not always be verbalizing those hypotheses, but I'm always thinking about, particularly people I know well. If I know their type, I'm sort of in the observation of like, interesting how she's using that. And interesting. I wouldn't, it's like I'm always sort of pondering and theorizing about that.
Yeah. It relates to the vision of the channel that I have, actually. I wonder if the storytelling aspect is something that is greatly interesting. It's almost like my vision is to combine MBTI with a Humans of New York style. So if you know about Humans of New York, it's people telling their real stories about their life, the good, the bad, the ugly. And there's something very appealing and very human about that.
Yeah.
And so, did you know what you wanted to do with your life at a young age? Did you manage to stick with it? Why or why not?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. So I've had all kinds of visions of grandeur. I was started out in journalism, and I chose that in college, and I went full on into that in my early 20s, right out of college, right out of my undergraduate studies, and that I my vision, being my introverted intuition, my vision was that I was going to go far and do all kinds of fabulous things, and writing was really the core to all that. But I got pretty disillusioned with journalism as a whole early on in my career. And I spent a few years sort of floundering and wandering and discovering. I tried a lot of different things. I actually write quite a bit about this sort of topic of how do you figure that out? And it was kind of by accident that I figured out this career. So I was hired to write resumes as a contractor, and because I knew how to interview people and I know how to write, and, resumes are a lot about formatting, and so I figured all that out. And I really enjoyed people's stories, and I enjoyed transforming people's raw data into something that would actually help them in their life. So it sort of just it hit all kinds of wonderful buttons inside, like, oh, this is really, oh, I never even knew, I didn't know people would pay me for this. And then the more I looked into it, the more I learned about it. I went for it. And really by 26, I was 27. I was a partner in this company and working, full time at it. And then I got certified in the MBTI. I've done various other certifications. I've gotten a master's over time. And so for 30 years, I've essentially done what I say to people is that oftentimes it looks like I've changed what I do, but this is what I've really done for 30 years, is I help people figure out what they want to do, and I help them get on with doing that. So whether that's with individuals with their careers, or people starting businesses, or organizations developing leadership teams, I help people get really clear about what they want to do, and then let's get on with that, and let's go do that. And so that has kept my interest and curiosity going all these years, and somehow I keep sticking with it. So
yeah, you help them find their dream and stick to their dream.
Yeah.
Amazing. How has your experience been with TI leading types?
Wait, how is your experience? What? I don't understand that question.
So I'm guessing it's asking, how do you experience conversation with TI dominant types like the ISTP and the INTP?
So it's subtle. So I think that introverted thinking has a wonderful, wonderful humor that's innate to it, but it's incredibly subtle. And it just sort of it waits for the moment to step in and make the really bad pun or the really funny joke or make an observation or comment. And so the introverted thinking, I find that here's what I've really discovered is that people who have are not trying to prove how smart they are, introverted thinking types that are not trying to prove how smart they are a lot of fun to be around, because they're comfortable in themselves and they have a good time with that. But the introverted thinking types, and particularly young introverted thinking types who are still trying to prove to the world how smart they are, like as in their super intelligence, because everybody thinks they have their own special super intelligence. Having conversations with them is just like having conversations with a wet fish. It's just like they're always sort of slipping and sliding in there. They're their desire to debate everything all the time is like, okay, all right, like it's not really an enjoyable conversation for extroverted feeling. It gets tiring for extroverted feeling because you actually want to be able to relate and find common ground rather than always seeing what's the difference and how are you, what else is there, what else and what else.
Yeah. When you go to advice from a TI Dom and they're like, you're logically inconsistent there. It's like, thank you, TI Dom.
Yeah.
Why do ENFJs feel the need to rescue introverts? We are glad that they do.
That's a great one. I think it's because ENFJs, I can speak for myself that before I felt really appreciated introversion and just allowed introverted types to be who they are. I thought that somehow you weren't having a good time, and I felt an obligation to include and bring in. So that extroverted feeling so much wants everybody to be a part of the group and be involved and feel included. And when somebody doesn't seem to be speaking up, or extroverted feeling assumes they know what other people think need, which is a terrible shadow side of extroverted feeling. Then they assume that somehow the quiet observation means that you are feeling left out, when really many introverted types are having a lovely time. So now I don't necessarily try to rescue introverts, but I might ask them if they'd like to participate, or have some silence and pauses in the conversation. So if they want to participate, there's plenty of space for that.
Yeah, they have a term for that. It's called the ENFJ God complex.
Yeah.
It's inferring your needs and going like, I'll help you. They're having an interesting chat in the side chat. So Jonathan says, feeling awkward having watched that documentary about that cult where they all wore orange and one of the leaders was probably an unhealthy ENFJ. And then it's funny. I have an ENFJ friend and his name is Infinity. It's like a pun with the ENFJ functions. And he says, I know, right? Black is such a better color. And it's funny because he's using an orange icon as an ENFJ. So
I love it.
What is your experience with perfectionism? Do you prefer the mindset of good enough?
That's a really tough one. Oh, that's a really tough one. I like to think that I've developed a sense of humor about perfectionism, but then there I find myself caught in it over and over again. I think that, ENFJs are in charge types in Linda Barron's model of interaction styles. And understanding that piece also kind of gave me a lot more of a sense of humor about the energy that ENFJ brings, that all that intensity that comes along. And perfectionism, so it's interesting because the in-charge types want to do what's sort of feasible, like that can be, that they just want to take the action that can be taken. But they also have very high standards. And so those standards are often in conflict with the reality of what's happening. And that's often where I think you see the frustration of the perfectionism. So mindset of good enough, it's like a lifelong journey on that one. I wish I had a better sense of humor about it, but every time I think I do, then I go find myself in some strange corner of perfectionism that's not helpful to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfectionism is an extremely common kind of feeling that everyone experiences. And something that I say to myself to help myself when I get into those swings, which is all the time, is refinement over perfection, or get it out and then polish it later. Because the essence, it will still contain your essence because you created it or you made it. And so that's overall essence that you provide, or your soul that other people can feel, is what's perfect about it. So although it may not be polished perfectly, it's perfect because you made it, and that may touch someone that day that needed to hear it.
I was just saying, in contrast, my husband INTP being behind the scenes, that what the perfectionism really can overtake his ability to just move forward. And so I often don't see myself as so much of a perfectionist in comparison to him, but I also know that I have very high standards, and when I don't meet those, not necessarily when other people don't meet them, when I don't meet them, I'm particularly hard on myself about that.
Yeah, and if you're new to Linda Barron's interaction styles, I have video series on all 4 of them, so I'll link them below if you want to get up to date with what in charge and behind the scenes is. And so, would you rather have smooth I'm having a day. Would you rather have smooth complementary colors in a room or clashing vivacious colors?
Well, I don't know that I would say vivacious colors are clashing. I like really bright colors. I always want to go a lot deeper and richer in the colors than my husband does. So this wall's particularly bright. It's probably one of the brightest walls in my house. I didn't design it as the backdrop of my Zoom video. Just happened that way. So complementary colors is probably more of what my preference is.
I mean, they look good together, so. What is the APTi? How did you get involved with it?
Oh, so Association for Psychological Type, the international organization, which is what that little I stands for. I learned early on about APTi. It was a much bigger organization then, and I wanted to create, I wanted to create a community of type users, of course, as an ENFJ in Vermont. And I started the chapter here. And the chapter was quite active for about a little over 20 years or so. But how did I get involved? I heard about it from the people that I got certified from. They talked about it because it was, anybody who did the certification was always talking about the organization. I got the chapter going. I got involved with the international level of the organization. And then, right after I got certified, the conference, the biennial conference, what happened in Boston for the first and last time, and it was huge. There were probably close to 400 or 500 people there. It was one of the largest APTi conferences that had happened since then, or until then and since then. And I just completely fell in love. I mean, I was walking around and like Mary McCauley sat at the table next to me, and there were all these people whose books I had on my shelf. And I couldn't believe that, first of all, they were mere mortals, and that they were really friendly and really kind and welcoming and generous with their time and energy. And so I was like, these are my people. I want to be hanging around. Of course, APTi is dominated by intuitive feeling types. So I was right at home with, all the good juju there. So.
Yeah, you're surrounded by all of your celebrities that you've admired for the ages, and you're like, oh, they exist in human form. And so
they're nice people. They're really nice people. So.
Yeah. The Association of Psychological Type, I could be wrong about this, it started by Isabel Briggs Myers, too. She's part of the founding members. And it just is a place where people appreciate type together. And they hold webinars because of the whole COVID, but they also have in-person events, too. That, Markey is holding a Zoom meeting or a Zoom workshop at the Sacramento APT, as I've said 1,000,001 times. And so the link is below if you want to see it. My reason for hammering that home so much is I want to make everyone aware of the events in the community. So if anyone wants to attend or they want to get more involved, that they can. And so would you say you have a competitive side?
Yeah. Very much so. And it's one of those conflicts, I think, for extroverted feeling, because on one part of it is you want everybody to get along, and then there's this other in charge energy that kind of consumes this ENFJ, and wants to do it better. And I don't think that I'm doing that to have other people look bad, but it ends up looking that way to other people. Other people experience it that way, is that somehow I'm trying to one up or show off or something like that.
What would you say your experience is with other ENFJs?
Oh, other ENFJs are fun. Here's the thing that's always amazing to me is when I meet a young ENFJ. So it just so happens I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and 2 of my nieces are ENFJs. And of course, they're my favorite nieces, and they know that. And one of my nieces that I'm particularly close to, when she was much younger, I would say to her, she would watch the things I do, and she'd say, "Oh, I don't think I'm an ENFJ. I don't do all those things." I said, "Well, I'm older than you are." And she didn't really understand what that meant. And I said, I guarantee you, if not before 25, by the age of 25, you will feel compelled. You will not be able to help yourself. You will have your hands in the soil, and plants will become one of your friends. And she said, "No, that's not me." And of course she is. And she has her own garden, and she's always talking about it. And, she's like into all of her plants. And I don't think she remembers that we had that conversation, because she's now about 35. Actually, funny thing, last year at the British APTi conference, which happened to be virtual, a bunch of the ENFJs, we all kind of kept finding each other in workshops, and we were chatting with each other on the side, and we ended up creating, we call ourselves the ENFJ groupies, and we meet every month. We have met every month since, and we just talk about type. Sometimes we talk about our experience as ENFJs, but sometimes we just talk about something about the type world. We're all really experienced type users, people who've been using type for at least 10 years or more. And it's a blast. It's such a blast to talk to each other and have some fun with who we are, just have a sense of humor about who we are.
Yeah, the ENFJ homies. Well, if any of them ever want to be on Type Talks together, maybe you can all unite together in a video.
Well, we're meeting tonight, so I'll introduce it.
Yes. Yeah. What tools and habits have helped you grow as an ENFJ?
People around me. Actually, I would say mentors, people that I could, people that were other ENFJs, I will be honest, because the people who have been my most significant mentors I know are ENFJs, but they were older, and they were accomplished in their life, and they could help me sort of get through all those doubts of being a younger person trying to figure out who you are. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out that in many ways, but I'm 57 now. I've been on the planet for a few years. I figured out a few things. So that made a big difference. And the other thing that really made a difference for me is about 10 or 15 years ago, I realized that I didn't have as many close friends as I wanted. And I really consciously, specifically, I looked at the women. I was looking specifically for women friends. And I looked at the women in my life, and I said, okay, that one and that one and that one and that one and that one. And I just pursued relationships with them. And they're all really different. They're all totally different types and different people. But I specifically went out and created those relationships. And sometimes it's just a one-to-one, and sometimes they're part of a group. But I have a really rich, diverse group of friends now, different ages and different types and different backgrounds, and it's really helps me, helps me keep a sense of humor about being so dang intense all the time.
Yeah. So everything comes down to friends and connection. It is the determinant of the quality of life you have, and so if things feel a little wonky, it might be relationship oriented.
Right.
Cool. So Cosmic Lighting asks, what do you like about yourself? What do you like about others? what are the differences between these two lists?
So what do I like about myself? I like that I can tell a good story, and both in writing and in speaking, and I like that I'm fascinated by story. It's something that I really pride myself about. What do I like about others? Really, what I admire in other people is if they're curious. When we stop being curious, we just stop growing. And so I do admire that. I think I am a curious person. So I would say that there isn't a big difference between those two big qualities. And I don't necessarily, I don't look for people that have it all figured out, because that's actually kind of boring. But I am interested in people that are curious about anything, really. I don't really care what they're curious about, but that they're curious. When we think we have it all figured out is when we just stop growing.
Yeah, it's good to stay curious, morbidly curious, obsessively curious,
Yeah.
just to keep that childlike spirit within us, because when we're kids, we're all curious, but at some time with some of us, it gets hammered out. And so to maintain that childlike, youthful quality of still learning from everything. So it's continuous learning is synonymous with curiosity.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any differences between male and female ENFJs?
Yeah, male ENFJs have a lot more permission to step into that in charge space. And because of so we just think about big generalizations around socialization of that. Men are taught to be assertive and women are taught to be accommodating. And so I think that ENFJ women often show up as powerful, but in an accommodating way, and have difficulty really owning that they can own that space and step into it strongly and boldly. I find ENFJ men do that much more smoothly, and because of that extroverted feeling, they really get networking and they get relationship. But with that socialization of maleness, of North American maleness, let's call it. It's a really interesting blending of that, interested in people, but able and willing to own that space and step into it.
Yeah. You'll notice with some of them too, it'll be hard to tell if they're a TP or an FJ, because of males get confused for being thinkers all the time, even if they're feeling preference men. How have you found COVID?
I feel really fortunate that I not only live with somebody that I really like being around, but I had some kind of by chance some groups that were forming and then continued to develop during the first several months. And so when I remember after a year of COVID, there were various groups I was participating with. I had a couple of writing groups, and I had a women's group that we were doing online stuff. And as a woman that I meet with every new moon and full moon, and we've always been friends, but we got really much closer. So I, like, all of a sudden, and I said, if somebody had asked me to make a list of all the people that I would want to go through a pandemic with, I don't know who I would have. Actually don't know who I would have put on it. But looking back in that first year, I'm so grateful that those people that were part of that journey were there, because they made a huge difference. I sort of had some structure to my week. I knew I had a 3 or 4 places where I had to show up and, at least sit upright for a little while. And strangely, right as COVID, like literally as things were shutting down, we were just finishing a major renovation in our kitchen, like a huge renovation. And so for most of March and April, we were putting our kitchen back together and then using parts of our kitchen in our new laundry room. And which, I don't know if you know many ENFJs, but the chance to organize stuff, that is a big win. And so I was a little insane about organizing and like organized and labeled things to a place that, you know, is unhealthy for most people. But I had a good time. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jonathan, is Joyce a celebrity? Look, Markey is the celebrity. Well, recently, Type Talks did reach 1 million views on YouTube, so thanks everyone for that. But I will never see myself as a celebrity, no matter how many gasps I get. Polymetric asks, is there a difference between young introverts back then and young introverts nowadays, you notice? Or extroverts back then and now? Or do temperaments seem constant throughout the years?
Back then, as in when I was younger, I think that actually, I think there's a lot more permission. Here's the big difference. I see a lot more permission for being introverted now. That people with preferences for introversion recognize there's nothing wrong with them. It's, you know, they still can get pressure from parents and other people to speak up and all of that sort of stuff that we do to introverts because we think there's something wrong with them. But the other thing is that I think that we've had a lot more attention on people who are powerful leaders or influencers in the world. And I don't mean influencers in the social media way, but just influencing the world, and have recognized that their introverted nature actually was part of that personal power that they had. And do these temperaments, there is some consistency simply because, you know, introverted types tend to want to have more time to reflect and, you know, be internal. And extroverted types tend to be more external. What I find interesting is when an extrovert tries to tell me they've become introverted and an introvert tries to tell me they've become extroverted. That's another fascinating piece about it's. And all I'll say about that is it's called growing up. It's not called changing your type.
Yeah. Just because you can use your left hand doesn't mean that you're not right-handed still.
Exactly. Nicely said.
April Fools asks, how do you know if an FE user actually likes you as a person or if they're just doing their FE thing?
Oh, I want to know what April Fool's type is. So here's what I know for myself is that if I am exaggerated in some way, if I'm like, oh, what? Oh, it's so nice to see you. You know, if I've kind of gone over the exaggerated level, it's probably because I'm trying to not reveal that I am not thrilled around that person. However, when you get older and you just realize, you know what, I don't have time for all this malarkey. More extroverted feeling types are willing to simply, you know, stop associating or end relationships with people. They will rarely tell you that they're ending that relationship. They'll just sort of disappear. They'll stop showing up where you are, or suddenly be very busy. So how do you know they really like you? Is actually if they spend enough time really coming to listening to you and understanding who you are, as that's where you'll probably see it show up. And I will say that ESFJ manifests extroverted feeling really different than ENFJ does. And so ESFJ sometimes has a lot more of that hostess with the mostest kind of persona that they put on, and they fall into that very naturally. And sometimes people think that it's not real, it's more real for an ESFJ to have that hostess with the mostest persona than it is for an ENFJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are some essential qualities of your favorite stories or narratives?
Oh, they always have some kind of magical element to them. Time travel is good. And there's evolution of the characters. You know, there's some kind of physical or emotional maturation of the people. But I like so the kind of stories that I write are the kind of stories I like to read. And oftentimes my stories start out looking like they're just, normal people. And then there's always some element of magic that's like, of course it's there. It's not, it doesn't even look like it's in the context of the story. It never seems unusual, except it always has some magical element to it. So I like a little magic, a little fun, a little something that's unexpected. Storylines that are too predictable are just like, I just read, so I have a bunch of women friends who have been exchanging books with each other because we've all been reading more. And I got a whole pile of books, and I call them sort of the chick flick of books. They're like they're what people call, I never understood what beach reading was, and now I understand. They were all kind of beach books. And I found after the first few were fun and interesting. After about the fifth or sixth one, I thought, oh my gosh, these were all the same story. And I found myself not interested, not engaged in those, I didn't care about the characters. And so I've now gone back to finding my own books because I've gotten tired of some of those too predictable books.
Mm.
I'm not interested.
Yeah. Can you recommend us some books or movies?
Well, I have to say I have loved the whole entire Outlander series and the books. The show is doing a pretty decent job of the story, but I just read the most recent book this about a month ago. They're fun. People, but don't mistake that I'm interested in Outlander because of his so-called historical novel. I'm interested in Outlander because there's time travel in it, and that's really that's the foundation of that story. Gosh, what else have I been reading? I don't remember. I'm never good with names of books. I'm reading a book right now called The Starless Sea, which is a sort of convoluted book about a man who's realizing that he's written into a story that he's reading, which is kind of an interesting folding on top of folding. So I like books that also give you different perspectives, like it'll be narrated by one person and then another person, another chapter, and you get these sort of interesting multiple perspectives.
Yeah. Some of the video games that are my favorite is getting to see the story from different people's viewpoint, the villain, the hero, the other characters too, and they all have a missing element to their story, and you can all see how it comes together.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And so they're having another chat in the side chat. I just thought I'd show everyone. They're talking about the celebrity question, and then they're talking about how I owe someone hugs. She hasn't paid yet, but I keep reminding her. And then they're like, just charge interest, Jonathan.
Right.
Yeah, just keep tabs on interest. Guys! Thanks for the
fan club.
Yeah, they're quite a funny bunch, so I thought I'd highlight their comments. And so Power Red Bull says that how you can tell an FE user likes you is they share their unfiltered and politically incorrect TI opinions with you.
It's true. When they trust you enough to really tell you what they think about the world, they're not trying to be polite. It's true.
Beautiful. Thanks, Volleymetric. You can all come up with a fandom name in the side chat, and I will feel so uncomfortable. So we can't get my cousin out of his costly train model building habit, which he says is you inspired him to do, putting him into debt. Would you put some sense into him or keep him inspired? So these are more case study questions that people are asking you, and you can literally approach this however you want.
So his cousin's in a costly train model building habit, which he says, is I'm inspiring him, putting him into debt. Would you put some sense into him or keep him inspired? I would probably find out more about what he's getting out of the train model building to find out what it is the obsession. Because there's some obsession there. And it's finding out what the source of that obsession is and then helping maybe redirect the energy into something that is maybe more healthy. But you know what? If it's really working for him, who am I to say, right? I mean, I don't know. There's all kinds of, this is the thing about the last 2 years. I always knew that I was obsessive, but like I have come to see just how freaking obsessive I am about things that like really don't matter. But I cannot stop myself. And so, you know what, I always say, when people say to me, like, how do you have time for X, Y, whatever, all the things I do, I say, you know what, it keeps me off the streets. It keeps me off the drugs. Like, you know, if that's what keeping people alive, then let them do it.
Yeah. Money is just an object. Complementary. I appreciate your case study questions that you asked, by the way. They're good. So Jess asks, Joyce is going to have to file for Hug class bankruptcy. Oh my gosh, you guys. So everyone's been generating a fandom name in the side. The Mangsters, that's the Joysters.
Gangsters, yeah.
The Grace Gang. Okay, so the thing is, when people forget my name, they typically call me Grace. And so that's your meanie head, Jonathan. Joyce Maniacs. Oh gosh. So, what character traits are you attracted to? Have you found any commonalities regarding the personalities of your friends?
The people that I'm closest to, I would say for the most part, the people that I'm the very closest to are probably all intuitive types. And so they're not too attached. They're not so focused on the literal and the physical detail of everything. They appreciate it and they can go there, but that's not their whole thing. And so intuition is really probably the biggest piece for me. And then I like being around the people that I consider smart, you know, that they challenge, they're interested, they're curious, that's sort of that quality of exploring and wanting to learn more.
Yeah, the best type of friends are ones that help you grow and give. So they help you understand what you can contribute to the world, or they're a mirror to help you understand yourself so that you can benefit the world more, or they help challenge you and grow you. Because a human need, besides eating and sleeping, is growing. And so having friends who can instigate that or catalyze that is irreplaceable.
I like to grow and give. That's really nice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another fandom name, Joyce Mingaholics. The good old, at least this ain't crackheads. Love it.
That's right. So people don't always know like how to take that when I say it keeps me off the drugs, as though like I'm a recovering drug addict. I'm not really a recovering drug addict. I have had my experience with drugs, and you know, being obsessive about other things is much more healthy than whatever I was doing when I was doing all that. So.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good to have an obsession. As long as it's an obsession where no matter what negative feedback you get, you're still willing to be tenacious and to have grit towards it. You know that you really love something when you're willing to overlook all of the things that are going wrong with it because you just love it so much. It's like a marriage, you know, your partner has its downsides, but you know you love them when you still work through it with them. And so, what do you find ruffles your feathers? What have you learned to deal with such situations? How have you learned to deal with such situations?
So usually it has something to do with how I think someone ought to act and they are not acting. Like there's an appropriateness about it. So when I get on my high extroverted feeling horse about, you know, that's not how you should treat people. Or the other one, the other voice in my head is, don't you know who I am? You know, like as though I'm somebody special and they're not treating me as special as I am. So how do I deal with it? I have an INTP husband who brings me back to reality on a regular basis. That's one way I deal with it. But I also have a few friends that I know I can like call and vent to and work it out. So whether I'm like truly upset, like I'm upset to the point that I'm crying, I know who I can call to help me sort through that. But if I'm also just like upset and angry about it, I would call somebody else. Actually, I don't always call the same people. I have multiple folks that I can call to talk to and vent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a support system is helpful for that. And so, how have you felt inferior TI manifests, and how have you grown to overcome it as you've matured in your functions?
TI. So let's see. TI, it's kind of funny how it manifests for me. It's easier for me to see how it manifests in like my non-work world. I grew up in a household where like my mother was really into puzzles, like not like jigsaw puzzles, but like into like, I call them, mind screw puzzles, like that you take apart that, that wooden block and then you'd have to put it back together. It's like a 3-dimensional puzzle. Or I just never got them. Like I was like, this is not my jam, folks. I was just really never into it. Well, what I found is that now I'm more interested in those kinds of things. I still haven't mastered the square 3-dimensional puzzle, but the wood, like the wooden pieces where they all come apart and then you have to put it back together. But I'm more interested now in those kinds of things. And I think that is introverted thinking. But I also find that, so one of the things about introverted thinking that I'm fascinated by is that they want to find the entry point into the challenge. So every situation is a challenge for them. And it's like a big sphere. And they say, okay, so there's multiple entry points. Let's just find the one that we're going to start with. Because there's no one right one. There's just a one that we're going to choose. And being willing to step back and see things from that multiple perspective. And also the big one for me is not taking my husband's dominant function personally. Like if he doesn't agree with me or he doesn't think I'm brilliant in every moment, all those sorts of things. I don't take it so personally anymore. I will say that February in Vermont, it's hard to not take it personally because we all get a little cabin fever, but mostly I don't take it as personally, and that helps me make more friends. When I don't try to project onto him, then I can make more friends with my own introverted thinking and be more friendly toward that quality of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is sometimes with TI, they can deliver honest truth in a way where it's like, oh no, that was a lot.
Right.
Are you so you were at an event and you see one person talking to a small group, you are one of the group. Others seem to have a bad experience listening to this person talking. What do you do?
I probably will walk away now and just go find something else to do. Excuse myself from it, particularly if someone's just really not picking up on any of the social clues that everyone is having a bad time. If it's a group that I know well and I'm, they're like, I'm more on a peer level with them, I might try to change the subject or shift the energy. But if it's like in a business networking group or something like that, where there's a lot of mixed people, I might just take myself away from it because I don't like the less attention I give to it, the shorter time it will probably live.
Yeah, it's the same principle for group projects. If you want the group project to be shorter, just don't talk more than you have to.
Yeah.
How does Trickster SI and Demon TE manifest for you?
Oh, that is a rich question. A Trickster SI, the best manifestation for Trickster SI for me is going through airport security. The absolute ridiculous show that, the airport security puts on about how they're protecting us when we all know that 90% of what they're doing has nothing to do with actually securing anything. At least I believe that. But then you have to follow the rules. If you screw with them, they will screw back with you, and you won't be able to go where you're going. And so it's inevitable. Like they go through my bag every time, and it takes me every ounce of self-control to not scream and rip my bag away from them and run. Like I'm like, would you just leave me alone? So that's where it really shows up for me. And TE shows up a lot when I'm talking to a dominant extroverted thinking type. because there's a tone, or like it hits me in all these weird places in my body that I think that I'm in trouble, or they don't like me, and again, it's like they don't like me. And I'm always surprised. I'm endlessly surprised when an extroverted thinking type tells me they respect me. Like, I don't like, not that I don't think that they could or should, but like, I'm like, really? I would never have known that. I have a really good friend who's an INTJ who, she was in a group that I ran for years and years, and I never knew why she was in the group. Like, I could never figure out, because she didn't seem like she really liked me. And then she stood up for me when something happened in the group. She stood up for me in this really powerful way. And I was like, oh, I guess she likes me. She does like me, but she also really respected me. And what she was exhibiting, what she thought she was exhibiting was respect. And I never felt the warm and fuzzy from her. So that's a place where I sometimes have trouble reading their social cues about that they actually enjoy being in my company, or that they want to be in my company. I'm never sure if they're just tolerating me, or if, like, you know.
Absolutely. I'm sometimes left feeling uneasy after I film TJ panels, because I'm not sure how they feel about the panel or about me, because they're not exuding that feeling.
Right.
And so I'll find out later, they're like, if my brain is stimulated, I'm enjoying myself, then you could just infer that. And I'm like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the INTJ personality type?
INTJs. Oh, interesting. They're intense. I find INTJs particularly interesting because they're really intense and serious, but because of that introversion, it has a much softer presentation than the ENTJ does. You know, it's not like in your face. It shows up more in their sort of quiet intensity rather than their active intensity. What's my opinion about them? I really like a lot of INTJs. I mean, I find them to be intellectually, there's almost like nobody who's more curious than an INTJ. They're just endlessly curious. And that dominant introverted intuition is a place that I find, like, it's just like fathomless. You know, you go in there, and it's similar with INFJ. There's just like this amazing depth, and like this world that goes way, way beyond my experience of introverted intuition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you love the curious types, so it's a good match. Strange Channel S, how do you notice that you work with a leadership team with mostly TE users?
Well, because I'm a consultant, I'm often in a role of being a trusted advisor. And so it helps having that. That's the role that I come in with. The best thing I know how to do is the way that I function the best in those groups is when I know each of the members of the group individually, whether it's because I'm a consultant and I've done an individual interview with each person, or I knew them before. But when I know people individually, then as a group, no matter what's going on, I know where I stand with each one of those people, and that makes a big difference when they're all a big group. And when I was younger, I did not do well with that. I actually tried to emulate TE in ways that made it look like I was just, bitch on wheels and not really with the group in any important way. Tried to control it. But I just recently finished a board service after 10 years of being on the board, and I was the chair for 2 years. And it was really one of the most rewarding experiences of my life professionally, because I was with that board for 10 years, but then I became part of the executive team, and then I was the chair, and I was able to really make a difference in that group, and knew that people there reflected me. It was all different types, but there's a lot of T in that group. And I knew that in the end, when I left, the comments that I got were like very, very powerful. I knew that those people knew me, and they trusted me.
Yeah. One of the ways you can recognize TJs in a leadership team is they're noticing who is competent at certain roles and who is incompetent at certain roles. And they can be very sharp with that. That's one of the many, many things, but a focus on metrics, outcomes, goals, results too. There are many other things that can add
It's right. If
to
they
it.
think you're competent, then they respect you. If they doubt your competency, then they just tune out.
Absolutely. What song echoes in your mind?
I'd love to tell you I have a fabulous theme song, but I'm the last person to ask about music. It's just not. I have like honestly the song that goes through my mind probably the one that when I think it's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but like that's a nursery rhyme song that I knew from a child. So I don't really have like music isn't my orientation of the world.
Mm-hmm. How do you perceive people types with bad FE? Do you see it as an opportunity to shine, or do you find it a deficit that's aggravating, or something else entirely?
I guess I don't. When I think of bad FE, I think that they're like they're they're exaggerating it in a way that is imposing on other people. That like you can tell that person that they're trying to help doesn't want to be helped. Um, do I see it as an opportunity to shine? Again, depending on the relationship I have, sometimes I have learned that if somebody has not invited my advisement in or asked for my help, I have learned to back off and let people take care of themselves. So, I could go in and impose what I think on the situation. It may not be actually what's useful. Um, what I have done in the past when I felt like I couldn't. I tried to smooth things over and maybe distract that person to away from the person they think they're helping. I have a older sister who is an ESFJ, and because she's an oldest and she's an ESFJ, extroverted feeling, there's ways that she exhibits FE that make like I kind of go, oh no, like that's oh no, don't do that. And she often tries to, particularly when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s, tried to rescue me when I didn't need rescuing. And so having the ability to stand up to that was hard for me as a younger sister. Do I find the deficit aggravating? I do. What I find is it's sort of like, I wish that person could see what it was like on the other side. I want them to see the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always good to be able to connect with the opposite perspective, because that makes the world go around. And so what's your experience with ENFPs and P types in general? How do you deal with high TE users? What's your chemistry there, and how do you deal?
ENFPs are tricky territory. That introverted feeling is my opposing personality, my fifth function, and it's not always easy for me to be around when an FI is attempting to save the world, even though the world didn't necessarily ask them to save the world. And I don't see anything wrong with that. That's when I have the most difficulty with the FI in general. But ENFP has that huge energy around, that they're going to save the world and they're going to make sure everybody gets saved along the way. And so what is in P's in general? Here's the thing about P is that everybody has some P nature to them, right? But when somebody doesn't own their own stuff, like if you're a proceeding type and you just kind of like you think that it's fine to be 2 hours late to everything and make everyone else late, or you think it's fine to like just brainstorm constantly. That's when it's like get over yourself, like pay attention to read the room. So that's when it gets to be a little annoying to me. And how about high TE users? Again, for me, all of it has to do with, do they have a sense of humor about themselves? Like if you're an extroverted thinking type and you are so damned and determined to tell me and prove to me how competent and smart and in charge you are, it's like, it's just not pleasant to be around. It's not pleasant for anybody to be around. And so if I can, I remove myself from the situation. If I'm in a position where they've hired me to coach them, then I speak to it and I push back into it. And if it's not one of those cases, then I just sort of manage the best I can, and mostly I remove myself from the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good argument. Like, that's a good way of putting it. How if they have a sense of humor about themselves, then it makes it easier. If someone's super serious and super task oriented, it's the ultimate drain as well.
I mean, I'm an intense and serious person. I know that. But when I didn't have a sense of that and I have a little humor about that, I was just not pleasant, And I think I can still be overbearing, but like I'm aware that's the perception that people have of me, and I don't think that it's necessarily incorrect,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
What's my favorite kind of tea? My current favorite tea is Lady Grey tea. That's what I drink most of the time. My dessert tea, my fun, if I want a dessert in a cup of tea, it's Good Earth tea that's got it's their original spicy, cinnamony, lovely little thing. Literal and metaphorical. I don't know what a metaphorical tea is.
It's a cultural thing where people say tea as gossip too. So I don't know if they meant that. What's your favorite kind of gossip? Do you hate gossip, like gossip?
So the thing is that this is extroverted feeling. Extroverted feeling likes to be in on the, in the know about what's happening with people. And so I'm often in a position where, not only because of my actual professional role, but my friends, is that I will, people tell me a lot of things. They ask my consideration about various things. So I hear about things that aren't necessarily public knowledge. And I like to be kind of in the know of what's really going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. The NF temperament, Linda Behrens puts as the confidants too. So people tell us things that they don't typically say. So we're the chamber of secrets of every human being out there.
Right.
What is your opinion on ENTPs? Everyone wants to know about your type in relation to their type, apparently.
So ENTPs, I love ENTPs. So again, very young ENTPs who are in workshops and want to debate with me in the middle of the workshop the very legitimacy of type, not a great place to use your ENTP wonderfulness. But there's a really interesting, and I've talked to a lot of ENFPs and ENFJs about this. There's this interesting little chemistry that goes on with ENTPs and ENFJs, because there's the extroverted feeling and introverted thinking do this really interesting dance with each other. Plus, there's a saying in type, when you use two sides of the same function, there's real genius. And so ENTPs and ENFJs both use intuition, but there's introverted and extroverted. And when they come together, they're both in the auxiliary or good parent position. And there's this incredible chemistry that goes on when those two, when they respect and really trust each other. And I purposely didn't use the word like there, because like can be misunderstood. When you trust somebody, you can have a lot of fun. And when ENTPs and ENFJs trust each other, the two sides of that intuition come together, and there's just magic. One of my very best friends is an ENTP, and she and I can literally talk for 5 days straight. we visit each other because she lives away from here for part of the year. And when we're together, we just like start talking, and we talk all day long. We go to bed, we pick it up. We just, we can just talk about anything and everything and nothing. And it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I like ENTPs, young ENTPs who are trying to prove again that when the NT wants to prove, any NT wants to prove how smart they are, it's just obnoxious. It's obnoxious for everybody, and so it gets to be tiring to be around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So use your TP for goodness, not evil.
Right. For good, not evil.
Yeah, yeah. As Markey said, they're all superpowers, so it's fitting to use a superpower-ish phrasing for it. Use your powers for good, not evil.
That's my opinion on sensing feeling types. Again, like if I trust them, then it's great. I find sensing feeling types. So it depends on whether it's a P or a J too. SFP is a very, very different nature than SFJ. So SFJ, at least there's a little bit of that extroverted feeling, kind of warmth. SFP can be really tricky because it's introverted feeling. I'll tell you, introverted feeling types in general for me are one of the more challenging because introverted feeling is really different than extroverted feeling. And every time I think that they'll, be warm and fuzzy and they're not, it's always like, wait, what? Wait, what? It sends all kinds of strange signals for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'll just tell you, my mother's an INFP, and so I just never understood my mother for all of my life. I still have difficulty, but at least I have some perspective on it.
Yeah. I always have the urge to fix people. How can I stop being like that?
So here's my general rule: is if they didn't hire me, they didn't ask it, and it isn't my role, isn't my actual like agreed upon role in that group, then I step back. It doesn't mean I don't have my opinions. It doesn't mean I don't want to help. But if they haven't invited that in, then you got to let go of it. And here's what I do now is if I hear somebody like going on and on and on, and clearly they're in some situation that I know I could help them with, I say, do you want a little help with that? And if they say yes, they've given permission. And I start with, some gentleness. And I kind of go like, did you think about, or have you considered, or you might want to, And then if they're like, oh, like all of a sudden they're really engaged, then they open it up. Because they've opened that door. If somebody hasn't given you permission, you got to walk away from it or just say, oh, that's unfortunate. Sorry to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the ways that I view it is if it costs you your peace, it's too expensive. So the moment it takes away from your inner sense of well-being, you got to let it go. Otherwise, you will destroy yourself from the inside out.
The last thing I'd say about that, by the way, is that if somebody is venting, they rarely want you to solve their problem. And so understanding the difference between somebody venting and somebody actually asking for help is an important distinction for extroverted feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And NF types are way more prone to getting emotionally dumped on sometimes. So just bear in mind, if they're doing it's sometimes to assert boundaries. Otherwise, people will take your not responding as them wanting to vent more on you. So
right.
Yeah, you set this precedent. You set the expectation.
Another way to get people to stop doing that, by the way, is to say, what do you want to do about that? As soon as you stop, you ask somebody, what do you want to do about that? And they don't actually want to do anything about it, then they will stop talking to you about all their problems.
How do you follow your NF? What does following a good vibe look like in your career?
How do I follow my NF? I feel incredibly fortunate that I have been in business for myself for 30 years, and I have been able to follow my NF all over the place. It's taken lots of forms, and what does following a good vibe look like in my career is when I am when people hire me as that trusted advisor, whether it's for a group or for an individual, and somebody really comes to me and says, I think what you have to say will help me through this situation, that's just like that's like a blessing for an NF.
Yeah. NFs also appreciate the story behind people. It's their why, it's their deeper meaning. And so it's very fulfilling and enriching to see that.
Right.
How would you choose between the two similarly interesting groups to hang out with?
I don't understand the question.
I don't either. I think I'm missing the context. So let's place some context into it. Let's say that there are two groups of people. One is
two similarly interesting groups. I get it.
Oh, okay.
If there were two similarly interesting groups, how would I choose between who I would hang out with? That's a tough one. I don't know that I would. I would probably try to participate with both in some way.
Yeah, you can have your cake and eat it too. Do both groups. And then spread yourself thin on both of them.
And probably I'll spread myself too thin doing it. But I would attempt to participate with both.
If you guys notice a bit of brain lag on my part, I'm a little bit burnt out. Like y'all are talking about burnt out INFJs in the comments. And then P.S. watching Joyce focus on her guest and the board is like watching a brain surgeon of emotions. Thanks, guys.
That's true.
I feel FE and FI is one of the biggest clashes in MBTI. Do you find this to be the case?
Yeah. People, when I learned type, we learned, there was feeling and there was thinking and there was sensing and there was intuition. And there was this sort of idea that there was introverted and extroverted qualities though, but hardly anybody was really talking about that. Because that rich conversation has probably only been about 10 or 12 years that it's been it's become common conversation. So FI and FE to me are as different as thinking and feeling. We often talk about thinking and feeling being these psychological opposites, but introverted feeling and extroverted feeling are completely different worlds. They want very different things. Their core need is completely different. And we talk about harmony being associated with feeling, but internal and external harmony are very, very different. And they behave very, very differently in relationships. And so it's a trickier area. And a lot of FIs have trouble with FEs because they think the FEs are always trying to fix them and trying to, bring them out of their shell. They're like, I'm really good in here. I'm really having a fun time. I'm just fine right in here. I'm having and talk about an internal song. FI, oh my gosh, they have this whole thing going on inside that is so personal. And when they do show it to you and you don't appreciate it, they're like, and then it's gone.
Yeah, when FI shows you something, it is showing you a part of itself. And
they
so
may be opening up their chest and showing you their
organs, just
look inside of me. And you go, oh my God. And they go, and you say, oh wow, that's so beautiful. Oh my goodness, that's so amazing. Then they trust. And it has to be genuine. You can't just say, oh my gosh, that's so nice.
Yeah. What are some of your thoughts on mistypes? Are they common? Do you think they undermine the legitimacy of psychological type?
I think people are mistyped all the time, mostly because people don't understand psychological type. And they want it to be the DISC, and they want it to be predictive index, and they want it to be all kinds of other things that it's not. They also want it to be really simple, and they want to be told what their type is rather than discover it. I thought when I first learned type, I was sure I was an ENTP. I think ENTPs are pretty fabulous people, and I was like, I want to be like that. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm an ENFP because I realized I wasn't really a T, and then I was like, no, not really. So I think people are mistyped all the time. I think that particularly actually there's just a tremendous amount of information online now by well-intended good people that are not necessary. And so you might be listening or watching or reading and participating with all kinds of things and trying to guess your type. It's like guessing your type really isn't the thing. And guessing your type based on someone's behavior or how well you relate to someone is really not an appropriate way of just determining your type. So it's a tricky thing, and I think that it does taint psychological type as a field, because people think, oh, I did that once, but that's not my type. And like I always ask them, well, under what circumstances? They say, oh, I took something online. If you took a test online, and it was free, it was not personality type. It was something that looked and smelled and tasted a lot like personality type, but it was not personality type.
It's true. Yeah. And so Kevin says hi. And so he's a part of Linda Barron's class, and we were talking about Linda Barron. So I was like, you might know him. So I just flashed it. And so I do think that a lot of people are mistyped too. And oftentimes when they go through the testing process of an online free test, they see it as the word of God. And there's something called test worship, where they worship the result of their test. And you're like, I actually don't think you're this type. I actually think you're this type.
Yeah.
A lot of people's first comeback is, but the test told me this. It's like, the test can be wrong. It's like, it's hard to fathom. And there's also meme worship too.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes it can be this this thing where people see the behaviors or traits of type, and they're like, I resonate with those. And it can really lead you astray, because psychological type is your cognition. It is not your behavior. And so that's why it can be hard to do studies on type 2, because if there are mistyped people, then if you do a scientific study, you're literally taking on a lot of mistype 2, and it just makes it harder. And so, yes, TE users are feelers through FI, and high FE users are thinkers through TI.
True. Very well said.
Yep. Any travel wishes, plans for the future?
Yes, I love to travel. I miss it so much. So I attend the British APTi conference. I have for many years now, and one of the reasons I go there is because I love the British Isles, and so I hope to get back there soon. I love London, and then I love to go explore. And what I do when I'm there is I go and I explore sacred sites and ancient sacred sites and stone circles and things, and I go and do my labyrinth walking and meditations and things, and connect to my heritage and my people. So
that's beautiful. Yeah. And so the last few comments I just want to read is, so Kevin says, it's not a test. Like personality tests, they shouldn't be tests. They should be type indicators, because the COVID test is a test. You either had COVID or you don't.
Exactly.
And type is way more complicated than that. And so thank you, Markey, for coming out and being your wonderful self. And your orange is very beautiful. your personality is very much that way. And so there's this brightness and this vivaciousness to how you see life and the stories that people contain within them. You're almost the gold digger of the beautiful richness within someone's mind. I didn't mean to I know there's a connotation with that word that I did not mean to apply.
I really appreciate it. Actually, it's been really fun, and it's been really interesting to hear people's questions and just sort of come out, whatever's on their mind. So I appreciate you have a great fan group that really pays attention. So great questions.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more from Markey, she has an event coming up at the Sacramento APT, and it is listed in the links below. And so thank you, everyone, for asking great questions, and thanks for coming on. I will see you all in the next episode. Take care.
All right, be well and go out and be fabulous.
Joyce fan club, come join the Discord. Yes, go join the Discord.